Amy looked at herself in the mirror. Today was the first day of the rest of her life. She had managed to secure the biggest job in her career to date. She was joining Fortune Industries as Chief Operating Officer and was feeling both excited and nervous about the opportunities the role presented. Excited, as this was a chance to prove herself at board level, but nervous, as her 5 previous promotions at Fortune's major competitor had been heavily sponsored by her long-term boss. Could she make it on her own, in a new culture with her new boss Carlos? At the board's suggestion, Amy had employed an experienced executive coach to help her with her onboarding. Her first session had taken place the previous week. Amy had never had coaching before, and she was pondering on something the coach had asked her as she made her way to the office. How could she use the discipline of self-leadership to ensure that her first 90 days at Fortune would make the maximum impact in her role? Amy understood the theory. Today she was going to be tested on how it worked in practice. December 1984. India was in a state of transition after the murder of Indira Gandhi. Do They Know It's Christmas was the Christmas #1 in the UK. The first Apple Macs were on sale, and Ronald Reagan was re-elected as President of the United States of America. I was 15 years old and living in Macclesfield, Cheshire in the UK. My dad was working in Saudi Arabia, my mum was suffering serious health problems, and my younger brother was struggling with my dad being away for long periods of time. I was excited that my dad had invited us all to Jeddah for Christmas. What should have been an exciting adventure soon became a sudden realization of my coming of age. During the trip, my dad confided in me how big the problems were with my mum and brother and asked for my help in supporting them while he was away. I came home, took my mock high school exams, and the results made me realize that I needed to completely rethink the way I live my life. It was my first experience of being forced to develop self-leadership as a discipline. Self-leadership can be defined as the intentional influencing of the way we think, feel, and behave to achieve our personal and professional goals in life. In reality, many people only practice self-leadership when a life-changing event happens to them, and they need to react in some way and take control of the situation. We can all think of friends and family who have displayed courage and tenacity to get themselves out of difficult situations. But in everyday life, some of us tend to put up with the status quo, as there is no burning platform forcing us to act. To bring self-leadership to life, consider the analogy that Andrew Bryant uses in his book, Self-Leadership: How to Become a More Successful, Efficient, and Effective Leader from the Inside Out. Think about the key relationships in your life, particularly about one that maybe isn't where you want it to be at the moment. It may be with your partner, your parents, your siblings, your team, your organization, your boss, your friends, or yourself. Imagine yourself driving in a sports car on a steep and dangerous mountain road in the Swiss Alps with the person you want to have a better relationship with. You are in the passenger seat, and the other person is in the driver's seat. The driver of the vehicle is in charge of the speed that you go, how you take the corners, and generally how comfortable they make you feel in your driving experience together. If you find that you become a backseat driver, complaining and becoming judgmental about how the driver is making you feel, then it's probably time that you consider exercising self-leadership in the relationship. This is the time that you should work with the other person to decide when it is your turn to sit in the driver's seat. Although the definition of self-leadership is clear, the way in which it is practiced is about understanding who you are and how you behave, and then deciding to change that behaviour with intent to enable you to fulfil your potential as a human being. You need to be responsible for your own thoughts, feelings, speech, and behaviour. You need to be responsible for the commitments you make to yourself and others. You are not responsible for the way other people behave, think, or feel. Now think about the people you normally interact with week to week. Can you think of anyone who tends to moan about their personal situation and blames others for what is happening to them in their own lives? Perhaps someone who you think should stop playing the victim and should just get off their backside and do something about their own personal situation. Now think about some of the people that you trust the most in your life. Try and think whether, during the last few months, they may have been thinking or saying the same thing about you. Perhaps they believe you should stop playing the victim and start to exert more influence in changing the situation you find yourself in. Raising self-awareness about who is in the driver's seat in your key relationships is the first step in practicing self-leadership. The Wheel of Life. The original concept of the Wheel of Life is attributed to the late Paul J. Mayer, who founded the Success Motivation Institute in 1960. It is another useful tool to enable you to think about whether you are adopting self-leadership in important aspects of your life. You can design your own Wheel of Life or use the example wheel in the PDF. The 10 spokes of the wheel represent the various roles in your life. Some of these roles could be partner, parent, colleague, community leader, or health. Some questions to consider when looking at this diagram that can provide insight into the balance in your life include: how are you looking after your mental well-being and your personal development? How are you looking after your physical well-being? How are you engaging with society and culture in your life? What is important to you spiritually, and what ethics are important to you? Where do you sit in relation to your role in your family at home? How are you managing your finances and your career goals? How much quality time are you spending with your friends? Are you in the driving seat in these areas, or are others in your life deciding where you are focusing your time? Once you have given serious thought about where you are spending your time, give yourself a score between 1 and 10 for each role, depending on how happy you are with the self-leadership role you are playing. A score of 1 would indicate that you are completely dissatisfied with how you are fulfilling your role, and a score of 10 would indicate that you are content with how you are fulfilling your role. Once you have plotted your scores on each spoke of the wheel, join the dots to form a spiderweb diagram, like the one in the PDF. This will help you assess where you might be out of balance. Benefits of practicing self-leadership. In a recent survey of global leaders undertaken by the Tallents Partnership, 53% of respondents stated that they did not view themselves as effective self-leaders. Indeed, only 5% of leaders stated that they were extremely effective in the discipline of self-leadership. This is not uncommon. Those leaders who have chosen to practice self-leadership in their own lives have seen big improvements in the following areas: more self-awareness about who they are and how their behaviours affect their own feelings and those around them.